If you love to color your stencils with different colors of ink, then you know how much I recommend using the Waffle Flower shader brushes. Well, now Waffle Flower has the new plus versions of their shader brushes, as well as double-ended shader brushes. Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca Keppel, and Waffle Flower sent me the 0 plus shader brushes and the 1 plus shader brushes and the double-sided 1 plus shader brushes. The beauty of these plus shader brushes is that they really apply ink very quickly and you don't have to work up lots of layers to get your color. Let's take a quick peek at these different shader brushes and how they compare to the originals. As I mentioned, Waffle Flower sent me the Shader 1 Plus brushes. They come 5 in a pack, and they are the pack on the right-hand side here. They also sent me the 0 Plus shader brushes. Those come 15 in a pack. Those are the small ones that really are great for details. And they sent me the 1 Plus double-ended shader brushes, which I think is a brilliant idea. I'm using a Waffle Flower grip mat on top of my glass mat and a piece of cardstock that is A2 white cardstock right on top of that. So I have the regular shader brush in the size 1, and I'm using picked raspberry distress oxide ink. Then I'll ink up the new 1 plus shader brush. And you see the difference on the left, the original shader brush, you're going to apply lots of layers to build up your color, or you're going to have a light shade of color. But with the plus version, you can build up that color in just a few swipes. So you can see the plus versions are those 2 pink stripes on the right and the 1 blue on the right as well. Here, I wanted to show you how great it is to have the double-ended plus versions of the 1. So I'm going to keep all of my 0s and 1s in one container and all of my 1 plus and 0 plus and double-ended 1 plus in another container so I can tell them apart. Here again, I have a 0 shader brush for things like seeds on watermelon stencils, for eyes, things like that. And you can see you can build up that color with the black soot after going over it a few times. But with the 0 plus, it literally takes one swipe and you get a really intense color. So it just depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for a light shade to build up, or if you want that opaque color from the get-go. Now let's try out those new shader brushes along with some of the new stencils and dies from their latest release. First up, I'm using the Pop-Up Fall Leaves die and the Fall Leaves stencil together. So I've cut a piece of white cardstock out with the Fall Leaves die. You can see it cuts the rectangle as well as leaves and little accent areas, and you can place the stencil right on top and it will match up the cutout background. So I have some Distress Oxide ink in Saltwater Taffy, and my first thought was to do multicolor individual leaves, but you'll see what I end up deciding to do is start with a dark color at the base and then just pull that color out with the brush. So I ink up the plus brush and start at the bottoms of those leaves, and then I just take whatever's on the brush and pull that color out to the top. So it gives me a gradient of color even with the plus brushes. You don't always have to go full on opaque with them. And I absolutely love how quick it was to get this multicolor background with the shader brushes and this stencil. So now I'll take the areas of the leaves that are die cut and I'll fold them towards the center. And this is that pop-up look that Waffle Flower dies often create. They have them in different shapes like hearts and things like that. Now I'll put some liquid glue on all of the parts that don't get popped up, on all of the straight parts behind this die cut panel here. So you can see this is really easy to do with the Sweet Petunia Glue Precision Press, because I can just get that little bit of liquid glue in all these little open areas that are not part of the die cut panel. And I can get corners and little places like that. I placed it on some pink cardstock so you can see that pink coming through on the little holes on the leaves and on the backgrounds. Next, I'll use the Print and Script Thank You dies from Waffle Flower. This is part of their new release. As the title says, it has a print and script version of thank you, as well as shadows for both of the print and script words. So I've cut out the script thank yous out of gold mirror cardstock. I'm using the precision press to put a little bit of liquid glue behind those very elegant letters, and then I'll mat them on some white shadows. This way I can pop them up if I want to, or just adhere them flat to the card. I love them popped up on this background, and I think that's all you need for that card. Next up, I'm using the brand new Multiple Fall Leaves Die-n-stencil. So I love this small stencil. All it does is help you color in leaves, and then the die adds those veins, stitched lines, and then you can cut them out as well. So I have the A2 piece of white cardstock down on my grip mat. I've taped the stencil down to the A2 piece of white cardstock because it's smaller than the cardstock. And now I'm using the Shader Plus brushes. You can see the double-ended one there. I have one end for Tumbled Glass, one end for Salvaged Patina. Those are two colors that I use a lot, so I want them on one brush. I think that will be very handy. And I'm coloring in all of these blues and purples for each of these different leaves. So I love on this one stencil, you get, I think it's 6 leaves, and then the die is all together in one piece. Oh, you also get a vein for this leaf here, or a stem for this leaf here. So now this die, I should have cut the die out first and then stenciled on top, but it ended up working out fine. And then this die is all together as well, so they're not individual leaf dies. Next, I'm using the Woodgrain Die. You can see there's a mat that you can cut out, as well as the wood grain piece you can cut out. So I have the wood grain piece cut out of white cardstock, and I have it on the grip mat, and I'm using the grip mat to hold it in place while I use those shader brushes to create an outline of that wood grain piece. So I have a slightly lighter blue, then a darker blue, and then I went in with the blender brushes and just blended out that whole thing. And I love the effect that you can create with those shader brushes combined with the blender brushes. I die cut everything out, as well as the print thank you, which I've cut out of silver mirror cardstock. And I have the shadows of those print words cut out of white cardstock. Now it's time to just put everything together. So a little bit of liquid adhesive behind the silver mirror letters so that I can adhere them down to those white cardstock shadows, which again allows me to pop them up, which I think is really nice on a card to get dimension. I'm using liquid glue to adhere that wood grain down to the mat, which I cut out of craft cardstock, and that gets adhered down to an A2 piece of white cardstock. I pop up both of the words thank and you with some tiny foam squares. These are my favorite foam squares right now from Spellbinders. I'm using them all the time. I find that they're the perfect height, and I like how small they are, so I can use them on things like these leaves. So one little foam square in the center of each leaf allows me to tuck it behind the thank at the top there. I can have the stems kind of tucked in behind that word, and it will still be popped up. Now I have one of the Subsentiments. I put liquid adhesive on the left and the right because I wasn't sure where it was going to hit in the middle on those leaves, but that left and right will hold it in place, and I love that pop of black and white on the background of all those light colors. Now let's do another version of the pop-up fall leaves stencil and die. This time I'm using craft cardstock, because remember, if you use Distress Oxide ink, the benefit of that is that it is not just a dye ink, it is a hybrid between dye and pigment, so it sits on top of the cardstock, which means that you won't get a muddy look on your craft cardstock. You'll get a really pretty, colorful look, and then the craft as the background, which I think is such a neat, different look that you can create with those Distress Oxides. And these shader brushes are perfect for using with Distress Oxide. You can see how creamy the brush and the ink work well together over the stencils. I'm using one of the 0+ shader brushes as a way to put down some ink as the stems using Festive Berries. So all the colors here are kind of pinks. There's one coral with the Saltwater Taffy, but I just can't get over how nice they look on craft cardstock for something a little bit different. I matted it this time by cutting it down to 4 by 5 1/4 on some gold mirror cardstock. And look at that gold coming through in the background where they're all popped up. I'll also cut the print thank you out of gold mirror cardstock, and this time I will mat it on craft cardstock so it really is consistent with the rest of the card. So again, just a little bit of liquid adhesive behind those letters, and then just adhere it down to the mat so that you can pop it up or have it flat. And then I have one of the Subsentiments that says grateful for you underneath, and again, that's all you need for these cards because the background is so unique and fun, and then the letters are popped up with dimension. You really don't need anything else to make this a really pretty card. I loved the craft so much I decided to do another multiple leaves card with the Die-n-stencil and craft cardstock. So I did it right this time. I cut out the accent areas for the leaves. That means the little sort of stitched or die looking cuts of the leaf veins and stem, and then I stenciled on top. That makes it a lot easier. I don't know why I did it backwards the first time, but this is much, much easier to line up. But you can see, because it was so easy to line up, I'm using 2 different colors per leaf. So I have a carved pumpkin and then ripe persimmon. I have squeezed lemonade and then mustard seed so that I can start again at the bottom and just brush towards the center for those darker colors. And look at how pretty the oranges and yellows look on the craft cardstock as well. Then you cut out the leaves with 1 die, which I love. And there's the thank you script, which I cut out. And this time I cut out the background or mat for the wood grain out of vellum, and then popped that all up on an A2 piece of craft cardstock. So again, I have the thank and you cut out of gold mirror. I adhered those to vellum shadows to go with the vellum behind the wood grain, and then just put some liquid adhesive behind the script letters to hide it behind the vellum there. So now I'll use my adhesive, my foam adhesive, to pop up some of the leaves. This last leaf is just going to lay on top there, so just a little bit of liquid adhesive. Again, you could add more, but these unique backgrounds and colors with the shader brushes are so much fun. That's really all you need in a card. I don't know about you, but I'm a huge fan of the Waffle Flower shader brushes, and I absolutely am so excited about these new plus brushes as well as the double-ended brushes. You'll be seeing me use them a lot. But I'd love to hear what you think down in the comments below. As always, I want to thank you so much for stopping by and spending time with me today. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you again soon. New shader brushes with the new... Stop saying stamps. Stop it. Stop it. Is that everything I want to say? Because that wasn't that hard. Okay.